Hello, everybody, and welcome back to this week's episode of the BeDifferential Podcast. I'm your host, Ava Gregory, and this week we are joined by Taylor Ferns, professional racing driver and founder of Safety Bank. Welcome to the episode.
Hi, Eva. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you about all that's going on.
I'm so excited to chat with you as well. I know we had the pleasure of meeting a couple years ago and just through the Women in Motorsport North America Association, and I am so excited to dive into your story. But why don't you give the listener just high level, a little bit about yourself so they can kind of get some idea of what to expect in this episode?
Yeah, so my name's Taylor Ferns. I am a race car driver. First off, I'm involved in motorsports for 23 years now. So people trying to do the math, I started racing when I was 6. And it's been my passion since I was a little girl. So, diving into a bunch of other different avenues off the track as well. I recently founded and started the Safety Bank, which is a nonprofit where we aim to provide adequate safety equipment to racers in need. I'm also a soon-to-be attorney. I'm starting to study for the bar. I'm a contributing writer for Speed Sport and really an ambassador for not only women in motorsports, but racing in general.
Absolutely. And I love that because that's in alignment with this podcast as well, is we just want to see more people in this space. So we emphasize women, but we are welcome to all. So why don't you tell us, Taylor, you've been in it for a while, right? Which is crazy because you really did start so young. What really initially sparked that passion? I feel like people either get involved because of family or certain circumstances. Why don't you share a little bit about your origin in the motorsport industry?
Yeah, so I'm definitely the person that got started into racing because of my family. My maternal uncles raced late models and stock cars back in the 80s and early 90s. But, in my family, we celebrated Daytona 500s like they're the Super Bowl. And, I just always knew at a young age. And I have this vivid recollection of maybe when I was about 4 and we were at home. It was NASCAR Sunday watching the race and seeing Jeff Gordon going around. And I just knew at that time that I wanted to do something in racing, but there just wasn't a high visibility of females in motorsports, right? So I just didn't even know if that would be something I could do. But I was like, maybe I'll work behind the scenes, just a young girl trying to come up with ideas of how I can be involved in motorsports. And then a few years down the line, neighbors of ours had what they call quarter midgets. So it's like a go-kart with a roll cage around it. So my dad and my uncle did some research and we ended up driving to nearby Lansing, Michigan one weekend. And when they put me in the car, it was instant butterflies. And I sat there for an hour and my parents had to pull me out because it was time to go. So from then on, I've been hooked. So definitely it was something that was hereditary, I'll say.
I love that. Do you think that your grandparents were kind of key influences in that, or were there maybe some, well, I mean, they were, but as you started developing your passion and career and skill set, were they influencers for you, or did you have maybe a different line of people that you really looked up to as people that you aspired to be like?
Yeah, so I think at a young age, getting into it, my uncles and my grandparents on both sides actually were so passionate about racing. My dad's side, so my paternal grandpa, he actually raced a little bit like to get by in his early 20s. And so he kind of helped fund my racing for a certain period of time. And, he really loved that I was racing. But, on my mom's side, my grandpa, he was the one that got my uncles into racing and stuff. And so, my grandpa was so obsessed with it. He unfortunately recently passed away, but I know that he was just so proud that I was still racing and still being really competitive. And so I think like just trying to carry on that legacy of him and, because it's definitely something that he passed down to the rest of us. And so, just try to make them proud. But they at a young age had a large influence on me and my siblings who also raced. But, as I progressed through the ranks and was introduced to a bunch of different people, Sarah Fisher had a big impact, coming from sprint car racing, like how I did, and then went on to race an IndyCar. And then, Lynn St. James kind of, put me under her wing after I first met her when I was 13. And so, I've known Lynn since then. And, she's had a tremendous influence and impact on my career, both racing wise, but also like off the track professionally. And, I tell her all the time, I wouldn't be who I am today if it wasn't for her. And so, yeah, those are just kind of a handful of influences that have, kind of really impacted my racing career.
No, I think that's awesome, especially the familial tie-in. I think that's really beautiful to be able to continue that legacy. And I love that you mentioned Lynn because at the time that we're recording this, Lynn's episode just came out as well. So definitely a great influence and mentor in the space. You're right, both on track, but also from the business development side. So that's
Mhm.
amazing. Tell me, Taylor, as you were kind of transitioning from the hobby side to racing more seriously, when did that shift happen?
So I would say it was around the age of when I was around 13, 14. I was kind of in the process of graduating from racing micro sprints
Hmm.
into kind of getting into more full size midgets. And obviously, that's when the expense really kind of like doubles and triples. And
Yeah.
when you start bringing partners on board and they start helping pay for your racing aside from just being family backed and things of that nature. And I will say my dad, when you're that age you're still so young, and you don't really recognize like what a passion is, right?
Yeah.
And so my dad was definitely the one that knew that I did whatever it took to keep racing, like whether it was sending out sponsorship pamphlets and you keep getting rejected until you finally get a yes, or
Yeah.
just being able to learn how to talk to people and navigate kind of the networking space and, training physically and, things of that nature. I used to get up before grade school or high school, get up early in the morning and go downstairs and go for a run or lift weights and things of that nature. And so, my dad recognized at a really young age that that was my passion. And, my parents did what they could to help support that. And so I think that was also a huge factor as well because, you don't really recognize what you're passionate about until you're probably late teens, early 20s.
Right.
So, yeah, my dad was a significant influence into, kind of like what kept me going and recognizing that this is what I really love to do.
Yeah. So tell us now, I mean, having kind of made that shift into a little bit more serious, you're starting to think about how I can be in this long term. You've been involved in multiple different series. So tell us maybe the journey through a couple different series that you've been through. And then honestly, maybe like one of your big accomplishments in any of those series.
Yeah, so I would say I've had the opportunity, fortunately, to race a variety of different cars, whether it's like open wheel cars, as far as like sprint cars, Silver Crown midgets, or like the Indy Next cars are more so the Formula car base. But, I've also raced fender cars, like late models and ARCA stock cars. And, I think I always say, like in life, but in racing, it's kind of all building blocks. Like everything that I've had the opportunity to drive, also like personal experiences, like everything kind of builds off each other.
Hmm.
And so, the things that I started racing when I was younger, gave me the tools and the foundation to kind of continually build off that. And even though it may not seem like it, but when I went stock car racing when I was a teenager, and then I came back to race my sprint car, my Silver Crown car, that really helped me in different ways. Like, okay, the
Yeah.
races are longer, more races of attrition, like a stock car. And, it helped me race on the dirt miles better in a Silver Crown car. And so, everything kind of, you can pull bits and pieces from things, and
Yeah.
kind of like piecemeal it together. And, that's what I tried to do when I had the opportunity to do the Indy Next stuff last year now. But, that was just such a completely different car. With the lack of seat time, I try to piecemeal things to, just do what I can.
Yeah.
But, it just all takes more seat time. But, everything just at the end of the day, it's all about seat time and, believing yourself and then knowing that you can get there. And, luckily having the experience that I've had, just taking the things that I've been able to learn and, hopefully applying that to a higher opportunity. With that, that's kind of more the on track stuff, but also with the off track stuff and kind of getting to one of my larger accomplishments, I would say happened in September of last year when I won in my sprint car at Salem Speedway. And, I've won sprint car races before multiple times, wing, non wing on dirt and pavement. But for me, that was a proud moment because I was also the car owner. So that was my
Right.
first win as the car owner and the driver. And, it's been a hard couple of years, kind of playing both roles and, overcoming all the adversity. But, we talk about building blocks to life and things of that nature. And, I don't think I would have been able to run the team in the way that I did without my experience being a director at a law firm. And so, that kind of when I was doing that, kind of showed me the way on, how to navigate certain situations or problem
Mhm.
solving, finances, things of that nature. And so, running the race team and then finally being able to win as the owner, I think was, such a big relief, but also showed, you can do both,
Yeah. Gosh, I love so many perspectives you said. And I have to say, I remember seeing your newsletter come across when that win happened. And that was really cool. It did stand out. And so I appreciate that anecdote there. But you're right, like the interconnectedness of our different skill sets and of life lessons, whether as a racer, it's on track or off track, and how you're taking the business development skills. I think too, just in general, that makes you a better leader as a well-rounded person, because I can think back to some corporate settings or even hobbyist settings where maybe someone has extreme experience in one area, and then they don't necessarily share a perspective or don't know what to anticipate because they haven't experienced it.
Right. Yeah, and exactly. And I think, that's one thing that they try to teach you in law school too, is having varying perspectives, don't be so
Mhm.
narrow-minded. But, I also had that opportunity when I was working at the law firm I was at. I had a really great boss, and I learned early on, starting there, working there when I was 22 at such a young age. And, they really gave me kind of the keys to the firm, if you will. And
Mhm.
it kind of showed different thought processes on how people may take things or how you
Right.
present yourself and how other people may perceive it. And so, having those varying perceptions, really helped. When working with people, especially in racing, you work with so many people from diverse backgrounds and cultures, and you really approach things differently. And so, I think honestly, an asset of mine is having the education that I have, but also my professional experience off the track, that has really nothing to do
Totally.
with racing.
No, it's so good. And yeah, I have to agree, because I think of like my day job, I manage and work with so many different personalities that you're right, anticipating how are they going to react to this, or how is this going to be received, as opposed to just what I'm trying to get across.
Like I remember when I first started doing like my operations gig at the law firm I was at, and again, young, innocent, naive, 22-year-old, I sent out this email and my boss called me in the next day and she's like, "You're not in trouble or anything." She goes, "But I just want to walk you through this on how other people may perceive it." And she broke it down almost like sentence by sentence, and things that I would have never thought that
Yeah.
oh my gosh, that was not my intention. And
Yeah.
she goes, "Well, I just want to let you know that this is how some people, not that anybody said
Totally.
anything, but this is
Totally.
how you may be conveying yourself."
Well, and I have to give credit and applause to that boss, because it takes a very special leader to take the time to talk through that. And I've had those conversations just in like mentor meetings or career development, just chats where people won't. And maybe something like that could have been, a negative impact, right? But instead, it was an opportunity for you to learn and to prevent from doing it again. And Lord knows, I have had leaders that have taken the time to do that, and I am so grateful.
No, my boss, Rebecca Spacita, she's the best. She had a book just come out on Monday. It's called Win Win. And it talks about like organization transformation and things of that nature and how to approach certain problems and things of that nature. So she was the best. I love her to bits and we still keep in contact from time to time. But you think about things differently when somebody sits down and kind of walks you through that. And it's just part of growth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
she was great.
I love that. Well, speaking of how do we problem solve, how do we address things when we see them, talk to us about the safety bank, because you started a project. I want to understand how the idea of this came about, and maybe just give the listener like a breakdown of what it is.
Yes, so the safety bank, our mission is we aim to provide adequate safety equipment to racers in need. And, really this started about a year ago. I came up with the idea because I had recognized that, over the years and being affiliated, with Simpson Race Products, and, they've been super great to me. But, over time, I collect all this extra unused or slightly used equipment. And I literally have suitcases full of stuff. And so, I thought to myself, I can't be the only driver that, has these opportunities or has all these extra materials. But also, I reflected on when I was younger and also, being a growing girl, our bodies change all the time. And so, my parents were having to get me a fire suit like every year, literally, when I was a teenager. And
Yeah.
that's expensive. And, you think about it being a racer and also somebody who pays the bills, you know, you try to be as economical about it as possible. So,
Right.
if you have a fire suit, like, okay, it may have a rip here, or, people who don't have as higher access to resources, they may skip over that, or they may skip over
Mm-hmm.
the seat because of the tires, or things of that nature, because people don't really view the safety equipment as like what makes a difference with the overall speed of the car.
Right. But it makes a difference if you can keep
Yes,
trying.
right. No, it does, but like people don't really view it that way. And
Right.
so, and not to say we need to make up for people's like lack of perspective, or
Sure, sure.
but we're just trying to do good for the community. And really I thought about just doing it for the youth because of how much kids like grow out of things.
Yeah.
I say it is a privilege to be in motorsports because it is so expensive, but it shouldn't be a privilege like having access to safe equipment.
Right. Like basic safety.
Yeah. So we have a process on the way we do this. So we have an application that right now it's a Google form, but we're working on building out a website and things of that nature on the back end. But once an applicant applies, we ask for, kind of like tell us your story, share us your social media, what you need,
Mm-hmm.
things of that nature. And, we'll kind of compare it to the inventory we have, because we've received a significant donation from a couple of manufacturing companies, safety product manufacturing companies. And so we'll try to help supply the demand in that way. But if we can't outfit somebody with certain items right now, we'll put them on a wait list. And we're also working on discount programs with
Mm.
manufacturers as well. Now, aside from collecting donations from the manufacturers, we're also going to be setting up donation bins, kind of like a Goodwill, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so we'll have the donation bins. My goal is across the country, and they'll be at racetracks, go around with racing series or touring series, be at local motorsports hubs and like racing metropolises,
Mm-hmm.
to where people can kind of, just bring the equipment to those locations. And
Yeah.
then we'll worry about sourcing the equipment from the bins accordingly. And we also actually had special campaigns, so to speak. So we recently just closed the applications for our legacy campaign, which is where we'll select, right now it's just one driver, but I eventually want to get to where we're selecting one driver per region.
Hmm.
But the safety bank will personally outfit that driver in Simpson racing products, and they'll be like all safety equipment, head to toe equipment, and they'll kind of be like a representative for the brand for the duration of the year, almost act as an ambassador. And this is specifically age restricted. So we're doing
Mm.
ages 5 through 18. And they have to show that they do stuff for the community, they're going for their education. And so we're reviewing applications for the legacy campaign now, but we're just getting started, and we've already been able to service over 50 racers and families. And so only a sign of good things to come.
That is huge. And this topic has made me think of already so many business questions that I just can't wait. But truly, the curiosity of like the kind of recycled items program, I think is amazing, of like you can purchase or get lightly used options. I'm definitely curious what like the testing process looks like of its, safety, if it's still there, or how many times and all that, which we don't have to get all into right now, but I think that that's amazing. And so I think back, there was an episode I did last year with a couple named Karen and Rob Nowakowski, and they are involved in the motorsport safety side of the house. And this is just it's not an area to skimp out on, but as you mentioned, it's often the first area that people trim. And I think that what you're doing is so, so important and so impactful, truly, so that we can continue seeing people here.
Right. And that's the thing, because, like I said before, racing's already so expensive. And, if you can help out, especially a younger kid that may be transitioning to
Right.
from quarter midgets to micro sprints, their increase in investment is so much, like just to get the car, but also the kids growing. I mean, to outfit a younger kid nowadays in proper safety equipment, it could be $5,000.
Right. Right. This makes me think, Taylor, as you were saying this, because I really haven't considered that. Like I was not involved in motorsports at a young age, and it's so simple when you say it out loud, but you're right, how often You have to get new. Did you watch Parks and Rec? Do you know
No,
that show? Oh my
no,
gosh.
I honestly didn't.
Okay.
I'm
To
sorry.
any listener that's listening, there's like a character that creates a business called Rent a Swag, and it's literally for kids because they grow out of new clothes so fast that like parents don't want to do it. But I love no, truly though, I love the mission here because it is such an important thing. And kids, you're right. Like the amount of money that you spend, I mean, even like kids go through growth spurts every 6 months. Like it's not even an annual thing. So wow, just so simple, but so necessary.
It's kind of and I tell this to people and they're like, nobody's doing that yet.
Right, right. I feel like it's maybe that mindset of like it's so simple that you think somebody must be doing it. You know what I mean?
I was actually talking to one of the deans at my law school, as like a postgraduate check-in, and she was asking me what I'm up to, and I'm telling her, and she goes, oh my gosh, she goes, it's so simple. You would think somebody would think of it, but it's genius.
Yeah.
And so, but it's also with our first legacy driver that we sponsored this past year. Her name's Ashlyn Whitmer. And, she's about 7, 8 years old. And, she's kind of in the transition phase from going to quarter midgets, and she races junior sprints also. But, she's going to grow a lot. So we wanted to make sure that when we were buying her the fire suit and building it out for her, that, she could grow something. It was something she could grow into. So Simpson was nice enough to where, they kind of made it extra length and kind of like sewed it in.
Cool. Wow. Yeah.
When she goes through the growth spurts, like all we have to do is like unsew it and then it'll increase the length. So
Simple. I love ingenuity. Wow.
try to be as innovative because it's like also you're trying to stretch that dollar as far as you can,
Yeah.
So
This is great. So tell me, because I want, like, this platform, I want to be as transparent and raw as we can, right? Like, obviously, there's a lot of showiness that comes across in motorsports, professional drivers. You see the wow, you see the glitz and the glam. But talking about the challenges that you've had to face and overcome in starting the safety bank, what have been some things that you've had to kind of learn and navigate?
yeah, so I think first off, obviously, when you have a startup in anything, it always comes like the resources you have access to, right?
Yeah.
So we're trying to get this going. We were lucky enough that what really jump started us was we received a $30,000 donation from Saybelt. And so
Wow.
that's what got us going from like an inventory standpoint.
Sure.
Otherwise, it could have been a really slow roll.
Yeah.
So right now, what I was able to do after receiving that donation was like PRI show. I was going crazy about the safety bank, talking to all the product manufacturers and, trying to get them on board as far as like donating equipment, but also how it's going to benefit them. So,
Right.
and I believe, and we've had these conversations before about creating mutually beneficial partnerships. So, that's been one thing about getting the product manufacturers on board. But I think another thing is, when you're talking with the manufacturers, some things that have come up is they'll say, yeah, but, with our mission, supporting racers in need, they're like,
Hmm.
that the irony of that statement, like racers in need, they'll be like, are racers really in need?
Mm,
I've heard that. And I said, I've thought about this because, like I said, racing's already a privilege to begin with.
sure.
And, somebody had said to me, yeah, they'll hound me for a discount on a seat, but then they're going over there and buying some top of the line rear end or whatever.
Hmm.
And, what I had said to the guy was, yeah, you're right. Our racers really in need, but this is an opportunity, especially for the youth, that what you're not thinking about is you don't see the speed difference with safety.
Mm,
And
hmm.
that's really what people think about I feel like at the end of the day. Like if a kid is wearing a fire suit that has holes in it or whatever, and they think they can get through it another year, they're going to do that so they can buy more tires.
Yeah.
Sounds sad to say, but that's really just the reality of it.
Yeah.
And at the same point in time, we are just really trying to upcycle. It's like recycling and repurposing. So
Hmm.
if that vendor didn't want to help us by, creating some form of a discount program, their loss is somebody else's gain.
Sure.
So, and at the end of the day, I think the reality is not everybody's going to be on board. You're not
Yeah.
please everybody. But, it's like any startup, you have like hurdles to overcome. And, it's almost like recognizing the problems that you're going to face ahead of time and how you're going to respond back to that. So I think, we've done well so far, but we're just getting going.
Yeah. Well, and impacting 50 racers already, that's huge. So you alluded a little bit to some of the goals you have, but tell us what you care to tell. What are some of the long-term goals you have for the safety bank?
Yeah, so long-term goals, I would like to, I mentioned before, we sponsored a younger girl, Ashlyn Whitmer, and she was based out of Pennsylvania with the Legacy campaign. And, I had realized based on our applications that we were receiving for our regular safety bank application that a lot of the applicants were from her area, like the Northeast area. So,
Mm,
like with the legacy campaign, I'd like to get to a point to where we have one driver per region to kind of increase our footprint.
right.
So that's one goal. Another goal is we're working on a website right now, which I think is something that's needed just to answer, we're getting a lot of frequently asked questions, establish a legitimacy in that way. So that's one thing. I would also like to, almost have a warehouse per region as well.
Yeah.
We're growing because right now I'm based in Indianapolis. So we're kind of shipping everything out from there. But I
Hmm.
think as we set up these donation bins nationwide, it might be easier if we have like maybe a business that we're working out of, let's say in North Carolina or in Florida or in California, also to help with shipping costs. So, those are some of the goals right now. But, we're working on bringing a ton of partners on board I'm trying to help everybody we can.
Yeah.
But if not, if we're not able to help them with something immediately, maybe refer them to a manufacturing partner that we have a connection with, or, we're working on one partner right now where they may be able to offer free recertifications on certain equipment, which I think may be helpful. So, the sky's the limit. I have a lot of things that I want to do with it because I think this is capable. I want it to be like the Goodwill of motorsports to
Yeah.
me. Which
I love that. Just everyone remember this, okay?
Because when I first started telling my dad about it, he goes, "This thing has legs. Like there's so much you can."
You're like, thank you. That's what I needed. The reassurance.
So, it's kind of a mix of short-term and long-term goals. And, we since we're a nonprofit and we're applying for a 501(c)(3) right now, we have our board of directors, which I think is a group of right now it's strong women, but I want to bring men on board as well. So, it's just exciting. It's been an exciting project for me to work on.
Well, I love that. And I mean, definitely you've gotten to go through so many learning processes already. But tell us kind of shifting, keeping the safety bank in mind, but shifting a little bit more to the focus on your driving. Tell us, as a female in motorsport, which sometimes I hate emphasizing like being a woman in this space, but you are, like, you're making an impact and you're here. How do you see the landscape evolving? I mean, across motorsports with what you're doing to contribute to the safety bank, with other initiatives you're seeing? If we want to go as far as diversity and inclusion, how do you see from maybe when you started in motorsports to where you would hope to see it, the things that are evolving?
Yeah, so I think, starting from the driver's standpoint, when I was younger and up and coming as a teenager, I'd show up to the track and, it'd be a midget race or Silver Crown or Sprint Car, whatever. And I was the only female. And
Hmm.
so now, we're like 10, 15 years on. Sometimes I'm still the only girl, but maybe there's two or three. And so,
Sure.
I mean, in that case, we've doubled within that span. But, in the driver's standpoint, I think, and also with social media now, you're like, if you can see her,
Visibility. Yeah.
like the visibility is more so there with social media. So I think we'll see, more girls like kind of not only just getting involved in racing, but keeping a prolonged career
Yeah.
because that's something that you see at a young age. I mean, there'll be a ton of girls in quarter midgets and go-karts, but then it's like the funnel effect. Like they just
Hmm.
fall off, like
Well, and they can't afford it, right? Like,
yeah, and so they'll end up, going to college or, getting a regular job. And so, but now I think, seeing like the higher visibility, seeing females that are sticking it out, making it work, like there is a lot of opportunity. Also, I stopped racing for a period of time because, my driving opportunities without money just washed out, right? So
right, right.
I went to school, stepped away, but Beth Peretta was really the one that kind of showed me, okay, if I can't be a driver, I can be an owner or I can work in some executive director role or
Yeah.
things of that nature. So, I think also females are seeing other opportunities in other areas, whether it's from a legal standpoint or being an engineer or working on the pit crew or, being part of the executive committee. I mean, there's so much also public relations. So, I think a lot of the DEI initiatives have helped in that role as well because
Hmm.
I feel like there is still a stigma in certain areas of motorsports, that, females aren't as involved in. And when you bring the girl on, it's kind of, the atmosphere of like trying to still kind of push through that stigma, it's still there.
Right.
But, I think for females, if they're following their passion, and they stick to their guns and they don't second guess yourself, like you're totally gonna change that perspective 100%.
I appreciate that so much. And that kind of segues. I mean, Taylor, you have been involved as not a driver, right? Like you own a car, you've been involved from the team perspective. Can you share maybe just some of the experiences you've had outside of being a driver, but still involved in motorsport?
Yeah, so outside of being a driver and outside of really the safety bank, right now I'm starting to study for the bar, right? And so when I wasn't racing and I decided I was going to law school, I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I love racing, but how can I combine this with my education? And
Yeah.
actually, when I sat down to take the LSAT, it was like a light bulb went out. And I was like, oh, I had an attorney that would kind of do my motorsports contracts when I was
Mm,
racing stock cars. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I could be like Alan Miller. And so after that, I was like hung up on law school. And, I told myself I was going to be a motorsports attorney. And, then I started racing again. But I became connected with Lori Eberhart, which
mm.
right now she's the CEO of Friends of Laguna Seca, but she's an attorney and she worked at a law firm in Charlotte as she did a lot of motorsports work. So, and now I'm starting to, work with other attorneys within motorsports that once I pass the bar, I think I'm thinking about joining this one firm, assuming it works out. So, that's just one thing that I'm doing from working in my nonprofit. But, I also think down the line, I'd like to run a larger team outside of just my sprint car silver crown team, maybe like a NASCAR team or, maybe be a president of a larger organization within motorsports just because, it's recognizing your passion and then making something work to where you can work in it. Right. So then you can never really work a day in your life. And so, I'm kind of covering a lot of different avenues: driver, team owner, maybe motorsports attorney. I have my motorsports nonprofit. So yeah, it's just really just pursuing your passion and making a business out of it.
Well, it sounds like an extremely exciting and busy time for you, but I do love that you have all these different perspectives and experiences to come from. And I think throughout this conversation, you've emphasized, your network throughout this. In some ways, I've seen the misnomer that motorsports is very individual, right? I think that a lot of people see the driver, they see individual wins or something of that. And I think that as you spend more time in the industry and as we both see the importance of networking, how would you gauge or how would you encourage other people about the team awareness and about how important networking is and how important trusting and learning from other people is?
Yeah, so I think like, whether you're working as a driver or being a team owner, or even if you're running a nonprofit like me, I couldn't do any of this without my network of people.
Hmm.
So like from being the team owner perspective, I couldn't make it to the racetrack if it wasn't for my crew guys. I facilitate put the team together, facilitate the guys, pay for everything financially, but I can only do so much mechanically.
Yeah.
And so, without my team, I couldn't get my car to the track, wouldn't be able to race, things of that nature. But, also with the nonprofit or like running a business from that perspective, I wouldn't have been able to grow the safety bank as fast as I have without my network,
Right.
without Pippa Man and Shift Up Now and her connection with Saybell and, collecting that donation, but then also being able to work with all my other contacts that want to get involved, and really help get this launched. If I was just kind of, I mean, I'm still a fish out in the big sea, right? But if you really, not only is it a thing to have the connections, but nourishing the
Right.
relationships and keeping those going. Some of these relationships I've had since I was an early teenager,
Hmm.
and it's, nourishing those relationships, keeping them going. Even if you don't need something from that person, reach out, say, hey, how you doing? Just want to keep in contact, or, things of that nature, because you're never really doing it by yourself.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
think
That's
that's
so
the
good.
thing to keep in mind.
That's so good. Well, as we're starting to close out here, I kind of want to lighten the mood, ask some, fun questions. You have driven across multiple different series, but as an enthusiast, as someone who enjoys the cars, if you could drive any car from any era on any track, what would it be?
Yeah, so I did some thinking about this one. I honestly think for me, it would be so cool to race like a sprint car or a Silver Crown car from the 70s.
Cool.
They were just so drastically different, no power steering, no roll cages. They always said that it was like real men that drove those cars. And so I also think it'd be cool to, see a gal wheel those things around.
100%.
That honestly would be wicked awesome.
I love that. I love that so much. Well, Taylor, is there anything else, any piece of advice, words of wisdom you would instill on the audience?
Honestly, I just say follow your passions and, never give up, because you're going to overcome lots of adversity. And you don't have to do a lot of problem solving along the way just to make that passion work and make it stick. But if it's something you really want to do, it'll make all the downsides worth it.
It's so true. It really is. Well, Taylor, where can the listener follow along and keep up with the Safety Bank as well as your career?
Yeah, so the Safety Bank, we're heavily on Facebook and Instagram, and we also have a Twitter. We're developing a website right now, so stay tuned to the social channels regarding that. But also, if they want to check out my social channels at Taylor Ferns, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok. So I share
All of
just,
the things.
yeah, all the things. And so I post just as much about the Safety Bank on my page as I do on the Safety Bank. So yeah, just tune in.
That's perfect. Well, we will have all of Taylor's accounts below and throughout so you can find them with ease. Taylor, thank you again so much for just sharing some insight and a little bit of a different perspective than I think what we've had on here before. And listeners, thank you for tuning in this week. We'll see you next week. Bye.